Alright, everybody, get your engines fired up. It's time for Lights Out, Let's Chat.
Okay, Austria just gave us one of those races where you think you know what is going to happen. And then Formula One says, actually, no, never mind. Because coming into Sunday, this looked like Mercedes versus Ferrari. George Russell was on pole, Charles Leclerc was starting second, Lewis Hamilton third, Kimi Antonelli was fourth, Max Verstappen was only fifth after crashing in qualifying. Ferrari looked fast over one lap. Mercedes looked strong all weekend. Sadly, McLaren was close, but not quite there. And then the race happened. George Russell converted pole into victory. Max Verstappen came charging back from fifth to second. Kimi Antonelli recovered from a messy start and almost caught Verstappen at the end. Ferrari went from looking like a serious threat to finishing fifth and eighth. McLaren had another solid but not spectacular day. Racing Bulls scored with both cars. Cadillac had a nightmare. Williams had another technical issue. Aston Martin had more pain. And yes, we need to talk about the Hamilton versus Verstappen battle, because that was spicy. Welcome back to Lights Out, Let's Chat. Hey everyone, welcome back to Lights Out, Let's Chat, the F1 podcast where we make Formula One a little less confusing, a little more fun, and hopefully a lot easier to follow. I'm Michaela, and today we are breaking down the 2026 Austrian Grand Prix from the Red Bull Ring. And this one had layers. On paper, George Russell won from pole, and that sounds simple. But the actual race was not that simple. We had a hot track, we had major tire degradation, we had a virtual safety car, we had strategy swings, we had a scary-looking Verstappen recovery, we had an Antonelli making mistakes early but flying late, we had Ferrari completely lose the race after starting second and third, we had multiple DNFs, we had post-race penalty notes, and we had a whole lot of, wait, is Red Bull back energy? So today, we're going through all three practices, qualifying, the race start, Russell's win, Verstappen's recovery, Antonelli's comeback, Ferrari's difficult afternoon, McLaren's race, DNFs and penalties, drama investigations, three major F1 news stories of the week, and of course, our question of the week. And as always, if you are newer to F1, do not worry, I will explain the confusing stuff as we go. So, let's dive into Austria. Before we get into the weekend, let's talk about the Red Bull Ring. Austria is one of the shorter laps on the F1 calendar, but do not let that fool you. Short does not mean easy. The Red Bull Ring has long straights, heavy braking zones, fast corners, elevation changes, and aggressive curbs. It is one of those tracks where the lap time gaps can be tiny because the lap is so short. If you make one little mistake, it can cost you a lot of positions. And this year, heat was a huge factor. When the track gets hot, tires start to suffer. Drivers start sliding more, teams have to manage temperatures, strategy becomes harder, and suddenly, the fastest car over one lap might not be the fastest car over a race distance. So, tire degradation means the tire loses performance as they wear down. The hotter the track, the more the tires can overheat. When tires overheat, the car starts sliding. Lap times get worse, and the driver has to manage instead of attack. That mattered a lot in Austria, because Ferrari looked good in qualifying, but once the race got going, tire wear and strategy completely changed the picture. Let's start with Friday practice. FP1 was interesting because several teams used rookie drivers. That means not every regular race driver was in the car for the full session. But at the front, Mercedes looked immediately strong. Kimi and Antonelli topped FP1 for Mercedes, with George Russell right behind him in second. Oscar Piastri was third for McLaren, Max Verstappen fourth for Red Bull, and Lewis Hamilton fifth for Ferrari. So, right away, the Mercedes pace was real. And this matters because Austria was coming right after some mixed weekends where Mercedes had pace, but not always the cleanest execution. Here, they looked fast from the start. Antonelli especially looked comfortable, and I know we have said this a lot already this season, but he continues to look way too calm for a rookie. Every time I think, okay, maybe this is the weekend where he looks human, he goes out and tops another session. McLaren was also in the picture with Piastri third and Norris seventh. It did not look like McLaren was going all out for the headline times, but the pace was there. Ferrari was in the mix too, with Hamilton fifth and Dino running in the other Ferrari during the rookie session. Leclerc would be back in later. Red Bull was competitive, but Verstappen was not miles ahead of everyone, and considering this was Red Bull's home race, that was already a storyline. So, free practice one takeaway, Mercedes looked very sharp, McLaren was close, Ferrari looked decent, Red Bull was competitive but not dominant, and rookies got voluble track time. FP2 kept Mercedes at the front, and Antonelli topped free practice 2 again, with Oscar Piastri second and Lando Norris third. Verstappen was fourth, Hamilton fifth, Russell sixth, Hadjar seventh, and Leclerc eighth. So now we had a clearer picture. Mercedes had a genuine pace. McLaren looked strong. Red Bull was hanging around. Ferrari was not far away. But they did not look like the cleanest race car yet. The biggest talking point in FP2 was heat. The track was hot and the tires were suffering, and teams started focusing heavily on long run pace. That means they were not just trying to set one fast lap. They were trying to understand what the car would do after 10, 15, 20 laps on the same tires. A long run is when a driver does multiple laps in a row to simulate race conditions. Teams look at how quickly the tires degrade, how fuel affects the car, and whether the setup is stable over a full stint. This is where Austria started to look tricky, because over one lap, Ferrari looked promising, but over longer runs, tire degradation was a concern. Mercedes seemed more consistent, McLaren looked okay, Red Bull was experimenting and trying to unlock pace. And of course, Cadillac had a rough Friday with limited running, which would become important later because their race ended badly with both cars retiring due to overheating brakes. By the end of Friday, the weekend felt wide open, but Mercedes looked like the most completed package. Saturday morning was final practice, and this time George Russell went fastest. Russell topped FP3, Antonelli was second, Hamilton third, Piastri fourth, Norris fifth, Verstappen sixth, and Leclerc seventh. So, if you're Mercedes, that is exactly what you want to see before qualifying. Your rookie topped FP1 and FP2. Your other driver tops FP3. Both cars are fast. Both drivers look comfortable. The car works in the heat. The car works on low fuel. And suddenly you are thinking, okay, pole is possible. Ferrari was still close. Hamilton was third, Leclerc seventh. And the car looked like it could challenge. McLaren was there too, but again, it did not look like they had the extra step needed to dominate. Red Bull was still a question mark. Verstappen was close enough to be dangerous, but not comfortable enough. And this is where the whole weekend became exciting. because going into qualifying, it looked like Mercedes, Ferrari, McLaren, and Red Bull all had at least some chance to be involved. And then Q3 gave us drama. Qualifying at Austria was all about tiny margins because the Red Bull ring is such a short lap. The gaps are very small. A tenth can move you multiple positions. A little mistake can ruin your session. Q1 was clean. The major teams got through, but the midfield was very tight. The drivers knocked out in Q1 were Franco Colapinto, Carlos Sainz, Alex Albon, Sergio Perez, Valtteri Bottas, Fernando Alonso, and Lance Stroll. That means both Aston Martins were out in Q1, both Cadillacs were out in Q1, both Williams cars were out in Q1, and Colapinto just missed out. Q2 was where Antonelli looked especially strong. He was fastest in Q1 and Q2, and for a while it felt like he might be the one heading toward pole. Ferrari also looked quick. Leclerc and Hamilton both had pace. Mercedes was still there. McLaren got both cars into Q3. But they did not look quite as sharp as Mercedes or Ferrari over one lap. And then came Q3. The top 10 were Russell, Leclerc, Hamilton, Antonelli, Verstappen, Norris, Piastri, Hadjar, Larson, and Lindblad. And the biggest moment was Max Verstappen's crash. Max was pushing hard on what looked like a possible pole position attempt, lost the car through the corner, and hit the barriers. He got out okay, but his qualifying was done. The crash brought out yellow flags and affected the final laps. This is where it got complicated. Antonelli believed he was dealing with double yellow flags and had boarded his lap. Russell, who was behind, lifted through the yellow flag zone and then continued the lap because it was single yellows rather than double yellows. Russell was able to complete the lap and take pole. Yellow flags mean there is a danger on track, and drivers have to slow down. A single yellow usually means slow down and be prepared to change direction. A double yellow is more serious and usually means drivers must reduce speed and be prepared to stop. If you improve under the wrong conditions, you can be investigated. Russell's lap stood. So the final top 5 were George Russell on pole for Mercedes, Charles Leclerc second for Ferrari, Lewis Hamilton third for Ferrari, Kimi Antonelli fourth for Mercedes, and Max Verstappen fifth for Red Bull. That setup was a fascinating race. Mercedes had pole, Ferrari had both cars right behind, Verstappen had recovery work to do, Antonelli had pace but started fourth. McLaren was close but not quite in the front fight. And Austria looked ready to deliver. At lights out, Russell did exactly what he needed to do. He got a clean launch from pole and held the lead. Behind him, things got busy quickly. Antonelli ran wide early more than once and had to manage that carefully. He was noted for leaving the track and gaining an advantage, but race control later confirmed no further investigation for that early situation. Leclerc came under pressure from Hamilton, and Hamilton got past his teammate for P2. That was a big moment because Ferrari had started second and third. Once Hamilton got ahead of Leclerc, it looked like he might be the Ferrari driver with the better chance to chase Russell. Then Verstappen started moving. Starting fifth after the qualifying crash, Verstappen needed to recover. And he did. He got himself up into the fight quickly and started putting pressure on Hamilton. Meanwhile, Cadillac's bad days started almost immediately. Bottas retired early, and then Perez also retired in the opening laps. Both were due to overheating brakes. That is brutal. 2 cars out within the first handful of laps is not just a bad race. That is a team problem that needs answers. So, after the opening phase, the race was already shifting. Russell was leading, Hamilton was under pressure, Verstappen was coming, Antonelli was recovering, Leclerc was sliding backward, Cadillac was done. Very calm, totally normal, no stress. Now let's talk about Hamilton versus Verstappen, because this was one of the biggest drama points of the race. On lap 11, Verstappen and Hamilton went wheel to wheel in a really intense fight for second place. Verstappen got past, Hamilton fought back, they went side by side. It was close, it was aggressive, and it reminded everyone why their battles always get attention. And Max was not happy. Verstappen believed Hamilton may have forced him off track and thought a penalty might be warranted. The FIA noted the incident, but it was later confirmed there would be no investigation. So, no penalty for Hamilton. Now, when drivers go wheel to wheel, they have to leave racing room depending on the situation. But judging that is not always simple. The FIA looked at who is ahead, whether the move was controlled, whether someone was forced off, and whether either driver gained an unfair advantage. In this case, race control decided not to take it further. Verstappen eventually made the move stick later and go ahead of Hamilton. And that mattered because once Max cleared the Ferrari, his race opened up. He could go after Russell. The battle almost hurt Hamilton's tires. When you fight hard, defend, attack, and slide around, the tires take punishment. And on a hot day in Austria, that mattered. This is part of why Ferrari's race started to unravel. They were fast enough to qualify well, but in race conditions, especially with tire degradation, they did not have enough. George Russell won the Austrian Grand Prix, and honestly, this was a big one. He took pole, got the start right, managed the heat, handled the strategy, absorbed the pressure, and then held off Verstappen late. This was his second win of the season and his 7th career Grand Prix victory. It also moved him into second in the Drivers' Championship. That matters because Russell needed a strong result. Antonelli has been a big story at Mercedes this season. He is the rookie, the championship leader, the one everyone keeps talking about. Russell is obviously very good, but when your teammate is having that kind of season, you need statement weekends. Austria was a statement weekend. He was not lucky. He did not inherit this because everyone else fell apart. He earned pole. He controlled the race. He kept Verstappen behind. He delivered. This was exactly the kind of weekend Russell needed. And for Mercedes, it was also huge because both cars were on the podium. Russell won, Antonelli finished third, and the team scored major points. But it was not easy. Verstappen was coming at the end. Antonelli was coming too. Mercedes had pressure from both sides. Russell did not crack. That is what makes this win kind of impressive. Now, Max Verstappen, he qualified 5th after crashing in Q3. At Red Bull's home race, that could have turned into a disaster. Instead, he finished 2nd and almost made the win uncomfortable for Russell. This was easily one of Red Bull's most encouraging weekends of the season. Verstappen had pace, he fought Hamilton, he cleared the Ferrari, he chased Russell, he held off Antonelli by less than half a second at the end. This is not a bad recovery drive, and it matters because Red Bull brought upgrades to Austria. Verstappen and the team have been under pressure because Red Bull has not looked like a dominant force people were used to seeing. The team has had a difficult start under the 2026 regulations, and the Verstappen future rumors have gotten louder because of it. But Austria showed progress. Verstappen said the race was better than expected, and that he did not expect to be fighting for the win when he got in the car that morning. That is a big deal. The question now is whether Austria was a one-off because the Red Bull ring suited the car, or whether the upgrades are actually a turning point. Because if Red Bull is suddenly back in the fight, the whole championship changes. Not for Verstappen, but for Mercedes, Ferrari, McLaren, and honestly, everyone. Let's go through some of the DNFs. There were 4 official retirements. Valtteri Bottas retired on lap 2 for Cadillac. The issue was overheating brakes. Sergio Perez retired on lap 4, also for Cadillac, also due to overheating brakes. That is a nightmare for Cadillac. 2 cars out early from similar issues means the team needs to investigate cooling, brake management, and whether the high temperatures exposed something in the car. Carlos Sainz retired on lap 23 for Williams. His car stopped on the main straight with an electrical issue. That brought out yellow flags and eventually the VSC phase. Lance Stroll retired on lap 45 for Aston Martin with a ERS issue. ERS stands for Energy Recovery System. It is part of the hybrid system that recovers energy and deploys it for performance. If there is an ERS issue, the car can lose power, performance, reliability, or becomes unsafe to continue. Fernando Alonso did finish, but he was last of the classification runners in P18, 3 laps down, so technically not a DNF, but still a miserable Aston Martin day. So, the retirement list was Bottas overheating brakes, Perez overheating brakes, Sainz electrical issue, Stroll ERS issue. That is a lot of technical pain. Now let's talk penalties and drama. First, Fernando Alonso received a 5-second penalty for speeding in the pit lane. The pit lane has a speed limit. Drivers have a limiter button and stay under the limit. If they speed, they can receive a time penalty. Alonso finished P18, so it did not really change the headline result, but it was another rough moment in an already bad Aston Martin weekend. Next, Perez was noted for an alleged false start after already retiring. A false start can mean a car moves before the start signal or is not correctly positioned. Even if the driver does not gain much, race control can still investigate. Then there was Antonelli early in the race. He ran wide several times and was noted for leaving the track and gaining an advantage. But race control confirmed no further investigation at that time. Hamilton and Verstappen had the big on-track drama. Verstappen believed Hamilton may have forced him off the track. Hamilton was noted, but no investigation followed. Albon and Stroll were also noted separately for yellow flag infringements during the race. And Liam Lawson was due to be investigated after the race for a practice start infringement before the grid had fully assembled. A practice start infringement usually means a driver did a launch or practice start in a way or location that did not follow the event rules. There are very specific protocol rules. So, this was not a race with a giant post-race penalty explosion that changed the podium. But there was a lot of race control activity. The drama list was Verstappen crashed in qualifying, Russell taking pole despite lifting for yellow flags, Antonelli aborting because he believed it was double yellow, Hamilton and Verstappen's wheel-to-wheel fight. Perez false start note. Alonso pit lane speeding penalty. Albon and Stroll yellow flag notes. Lawson's practice start investigation. Ferrari strategy pain. Red Bull suddenly looking competitive. That is a lot for one weekend. Let's run through the official top 10. George Russell won for Mercedes. Max Verstappen finished second for Red Bull. Kimi Antonelli finished third for Mercedes. Oscar Piastri finished fourth for McLaren. Lewis Hamilton finished fifth for Ferrari. Isaac Hadjar finished sixth for Red Bull. Lando Norris finished seventh for McLaren. Charles Leclerc finished eighth for Ferrari. Liam Lawson finished ninth for Racing Bulls. And Arvid Lindblad finished 10th for Racing Bulls. Outside the points, Gabriel Balletto 11th, Nico Hülkenberg 12th, Pierre Gasly 13th, Oliver Behrman 14th, Franco Colapinto 15th, Esteban Ocon 16th, Alex Albon 17th, Fernando Alonso 18th. That did not finish, Lance Stroll, Carlos Sainz, Sergio Perez, Valtteri Bottas. That result tells the story pretty well. Mercedes won, Red Bull improved, Ferrari fell backward, McLaren scored but did not star. Racing Bulls quietly had a great day. Cadillac and Aston Martin had rough afternoons. The champion picture after Austria is getting very interesting. Antonelli still leads the Drivers' Championship by 40 points, but Russell moved back into second. That matters because Mercedes now has both drivers in strong championship positions. Russell winning helps his title hopes and also changes the team conversation. It reminds everyone that even though Antonelli has been the headline story, Russell is absolutely still in this fight. Verstappen finishing second is also important. Red Bull has not had the season it wanted, but if Austria is a sign that the upgrades worked, then Max could start taking points off everyone. Hamilton finished fifth, which is not what Ferrari wanted after Barcelona. That hurts his momentum. McLaren scored with both cars, but again, they need more than points if they want to fight at the very top. And Ferrari still needs to figure out why the car was fast on Saturday but not strong enough on Sunday. The big championship takeaway, Mercedes is still the team with the strongest overall position. Red Bull may be waking up, Ferrari is inconsistent, McLaren is steady but needs a breakthrough. Antonelli is still leading, but Russell just reminded everyone he is not going away. This week's question of the week is, after Austria, which result tells us more about the rest of the season? George Russell winning from pole, or Max Verstappen nearly winning after starting fifth? Because both are huge. On one side, Russell winning the pole tells us Mercedes is still the team to beat. They had the car, they had the strategy, and Russell delivered under pressure. It also tells us he is not letting Antonelli own the Mercedes storyline. On the other hand, Verstappen finishing second after qualifying fifth and crashing in Q3 might be the bigger warning sign for everyone else. Red Bull brought upgrades, and suddenly Max looked like he could fight for the win. If that is real, the championship picture changes fast. So, what matters more? Russell proving Mercedes is still on top, or Verstappen proving Red Bull may be waking up? I think Verstappen's result might be the bigger long-term story, even though Russell absolutely deserves the headline. Russell's win was brilliant. He earned it, he converted pole, he managed the race, he did everything right. But we already knew Mercedes was strong. What we did not know was whether Red Bull could actually close the gap. Austria gave us the first real sign that maybe they can. If Verstappen can fight for wins again, he becomes a problem immediately. He may not be leading the championship right now, but nobody wants Max Verstappen suddenly showing up with race-winning pace halfway through the season. So, my answer is Russell's win was the biggest result of the day. Verstappen's recovery might be the biggest warning for the rest of the season. Now, I want to know what you think. Was Austria more about Russell proving himself, or Verstappen proving Red Bull is not done? Drop your answers in the comments. Now, before I end the episode, let's get into 3 major F1 news stories of the week. Starting off strong, Verstappen's future rumors are getting louder. The biggest off-track story is still Max Verstappen's future. Why are people talking about this? Because Red Bull has not been dominant under the 2026 regulations. Verstappen is still under contract through 2028, but it has been widely reported that performance-related exit clauses could potentially let him leave early if Red Bull is not competitive enough. That is why every time Red Bull struggles, the rumors come back. Mercedes has been linked before. McLaren became part of the conversation during the Austrian weekend. Aston Martin gets mentioned because of its big investment. Audi gets mentioned occasionally because of the long-term factory project, though there is no strong evidence of a deal. McLaren CEO Zak Brown joked that Verstappen would only have a seat if one of McLaren's current drivers slipped on a banana peel, which is very Zak Brown. The point was basically, McLaren likes its lineup with Norris and Piastri. Red Bull team principal has said Verstappen wants to stay with Red Bull, but also made it clear that Max needs a fast car to be happy, and that is the key. If Red Bull gives him a race-winning car, the rumors calm down. If Red Bull keeps struggling, they get louder. Austria helped Red Bull. Verstappen finished second, nearly fought for the win, and said the race was better than expected. That does not end the rumors, but it gives Red Bull a stronger argument. The real question is whether Austria was the beginning of a comeback or just one good weekend. Now our next story is Ferrari's Barcelona high disappeared fast. Ferrari came into Austria with momentum. Hamilton had just won his first Grand Prix for Ferrari in Barcelona. Ferrari fans were excited, the car looked like it had taken a step, and then Austria qualifying looked promising too. Leclerc P2, Hamilton P3. That should have been a huge opportunity, but Sunday was a different story. Hamilton finished 5th and questioned why Ferrari lacked pace. Leclerc finished 8th and was openly frustrated with the tires. Ferrari's 3-stop strategy did not work, and Fred admitted the team may have reached too much to Mercedes instead of focusing on its own race. That is a big story because Ferrari cannot afford to be a Saturday team. They need race pace, they need tire management, they need consistent strategy. Barcelona showed Ferrari can win. Austria showed us they are not there every weekend yet, and the inconsistency could decide their season. Now, story number 3, Mercedes is becoming a 2-driver championship problem for everyone else. Mercedes left Austria with a win and a podium. Russell won, Antonelli finished 3rd. Antonelli still leads the championship. Russell is now 2nd. That is dangerous for everyone else because Mercedes does not just have one driver scoring. They have both. Antonelli has been the rookie superstar. Russell just won from pole. The team is scoring big points even when things are not perfect. And in a season where Red Bull is trying to recover, Ferrari is inconsistent, and McLaren is still chasing wins, Mercedes looks like the most complete team. There are still things to improve. Austria was close. Red Bull nearly got them. Antonelli had a messy start. Competition is tightening. But Mercedes is still the team everyone is chasing right now. Russell and Antonelli keep scoring like this. The Constructors' Championship could start leaning towards Mercedes. That is it for today's Austrian Grand Prix recap. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure you follow or subscribe to Lights Out, Let's Chat, wherever you are listening. And if you're watching on YouTube, like the video, leave a comment, and answer the question of the week. Was Austria more about George Russell improving himself, or Max Verstappen proving Red Bull is back in the fight? Next up, Formula One heads to Silverstone for the British Grand Prix, and that is going to be a big one. Thank you so much for hanging out with me. Until next time, lights out, let's chat. My final thoughts on Austria is this. This race made the season feel even more alive. Mercedes still looks like the strongest team overall, but Red Bull finally looked dangerous again. Ferrari showed that one good weekend does not automatically mean they are back every weekend. McLaren is still scoring, but needs more pace to win. Racing Bulls keep stealing points in the midfield. Cadillac and Aston Martin have major work to do. And George Russell needed this win. Not because people doubted he was good, but because Antonelli has been such a huge story this season. Russell needed a weekend where he could say, hey, I'm still here. Austria was that weekend. But Verstappen's second place might be the thing everyone remembers when we look back later. Because if Red Bull is waking up, this championship is about to get a lot messier. And honestly, good. That is exactly what we want.
From Lights Out to the Checkered Flag, this has been Lights Out, Let's Chat podcast. We'll see you next time.